Welcome to the next session of training on PitchPerfector. The first area we begin with is a single note. All vocalists need to be confident in being able to sing a single note very well before they move on to more advanced and more complicated patterns. So this technique that we walk through for the single note, we'll also be able to expand to working with the short scale and the triad, and we'll demonstrate those as well. With the single note, what we want to do is begin by finding a note that's comfortably within your range and working on that until you are very confident and your pitches improve significantly. Going to our range guide, we'll see that Carrie is an alto, and that's a general range for an alto. So let's start at this pitch, a G4, and record this single pitch. Great. So the pitch for this note looks pretty good. Now let's move down a little bit. We're going to go almost halfway down to the low end of the range and go to a C. Some of the things that we can notice right away are that we have an approach issue that's happening where the approach is starting off significantly below the note. On the note that's right in the middle, the G, the pitch stayed very, very close to the line, and as we're moving down, at least so far, this is only 2 data points that we're looking at, the pitch hovers around a bit more. It goes a little higher, a little bit lower, as you can see. It's not quite as smooth. Let's go down to the bottom of the range and see what our pitch looks like there. So this is the idea. You start at the high end or the middle of your range, get comfortable with that, gradually move down to the lower end of your range, and now let's also work a little bit up. Some things that we can notice here are that this larger scooping thing, there's less of that to reach the note. The center point of this pitch is pretty solid. The next thing to do after we work through the single notes then is to progress to short scales. I want to change the color here to blue and come back and sing that again. I'm going to play the pattern. So one of the things that can be of value when you're working with these different colors, if you come back and sing them, you can kind of get an idea of, well, am I doing the same thing each time? Or maybe that was just an anomaly that one time I sang it that way. In this case, most of the things that were happening look fairly similar here. So the structure is fairly similar, but this is where using different colors could come in handy. Now for demonstration purposes, we're going to move on then to the triad, but before that, let me just comment and remind again that we started with the single note, and you're going to work throughout your range and get those pitches down. Then you're going to move to a short scale and then triad. Within the short scale, you do the same thing of working down and working up in your range. And what you'll find are different characteristics that will show up. And we'll see that more when we move to the triad. So now we're going to move to the triad. So the first thing we notice is that we still have a little scooping thing, but even after the scooping, there's a little bit of difficulty getting right on the pitch. When we're coming up to the third, mostly hovering a bit below it, then finding it, and then coming up and not quite catching the fifth, dropping back down on the third, and then again, fairly good in zoning it or honing in on the pitch here, but then fading off a little bit. But let's try it again. Rather than falling short of the fifth, we overshot it a little bit and came back in. So this may be something just to let us know that these are just anomalies. We're still working. These aren't necessarily fixed patterns at this point in the range. We have a suspicion now, even with just 2 trials, that we're coming in a little flatter on our thirds. And we can also see that with their starting pitch and our ending notes that we're having a little bit of challenges as well. So what we want to do is then work our way down and our way up and see whether or not these patterns hold true in other parts of the range. What you may find is in the lower part of your range, you're sharper or flatter on certain parts of this, and when you get to other parts of your range, you're sharper or flatter on different notes. But very commonly what happens is that people will find that, for example, on the 5th, they might always overshoot the 5th and then dive into it, or come in a little bit short and work their way up. So I hope this gives you a good flavor of how to work with PitchPerfector. And now we're going to go back to some very, very basics once more.